Hi, want to thank everybody for joining us today here in Hebron. Um, we welcome you to this wonderful tour and definitely welcome your questions. Please don't hesitate to write them in the chat and we will do all we can to answer them. We have limited time here together, but we're grateful to be here with you and hope you'll join us for the other tours that will be coming up, Tzfat, Tel Aviv, and Golan Heights. We're here with our fabulous tour guide, David Sussman. We definitely want to thank our sponsors. Without you, we could not do this, and without the help of everybody out there. So thank you. Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta, an innovation initiative, the Consulate General of Israel to the Southeast, Herut North America, World Herut, and the Evans Family Foundation. We have some wonderful promotional partners that we want to thank quickly. Hillel of Georgia, Atlanta JCRC, Lamud, JLFLA, that's the interest-free loans, the MJCC, Beth Shalom, Congregation B'nai Torah, or Hadash, B'nai Brith, Hadassah Evolve, Hebrew Order of David, and they do the Kosher Barbecue Festival. The Weber School, Rams of Israel, Weber's Rams of Israel Club, Simon Wiesenthal Center, Augusta Jewish Museum, JFCA, the Jewish Federation of Central Alabama, St. Louis Friends of Israel, United with Israel, and Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Thank you all. And thank you to our media partners for getting the word out. Hopefully that's how you heard of us or on Facebook. Please share these tours with your friends and family. All are welcome. I'd like to introduce our incredible tour guide, David Sussman. He is here with us now. David, hi. We can't hear you. Cannot hear a thing you're saying, but it looks beautiful over there and we're glad to be there with you. Hopefully we'll get the sound worked out. Here you are. Thanks.
How you doing, Cheryl?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Excited about today's tour.
Yes, so are we.
Great. Shall I get started?
Please.
All right. Fantastic. Well, shalom, everybody. Hello to everybody who's joining us today. My name is David Sussman. And as you can hear, take a step back, Meryl. As you can hear from my accent, I'm American. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a Yankee, and but I don't like the Yankees.
Oh, no, you don't want to say that here.
And right, because there's a lot of ex-New Yorkers, I assume, out there in Atlanta. But you know, we have people from all around the world. It's the Atlanta Israel Coalition. But let me just tell everybody that it's really not segregated just to Atlanta. It's really an initiative to bring Israel closer to the masses, not just in Atlanta, not just in America, but really all around the world, because we know that the land of Israel and the biblical stories that took place here are important to everyone who believes in Hashem, who believes in God, who believes in the oneness of everything and the oneness of humanity and the need for us to build bridges and connections, which is why I really want to say thank you again to all the sponsors. And you rattled off just a few of them, but I know that you have partnered with many, many people in Atlanta and around the world. And I just think that's great because that builds those connections and the dialogue that's really required between the Jewish people, between all the facets and the different denominations within Judaism, but really across humanity and the globe in its entirety. So a big Yasher Koach, which in Hebrew means more power to you, to the Atlanta Israel Coalition, to Cheryl, to Lee, and to everybody who's working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this content available to you wherever you are. And I have to say it, and I know Cheryl's gonna be a little upset about it, but it really only happens with your generosity and your support. So if you do enjoy this tour, which I hope that you will, and I can see already by some of the names that on the participants that we have a lot of people who are with us on the Path of the Patriarchs tour and on various other programming that the AIC has provided. So obviously you guys are already supporters. You're back here for another tour. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, if you enjoy it, please hit the link that's been emailed out to you. And if you can support in any which way, the AIC, myself, and Israel will appreciate it. It really is a blessing to our small nation here in the middle of the Middle East, the only free democratic society that exists out here. So please, if you can, give generously. Today's tour is of the holy city of Hebron, right? Hebron, which comes from the Hebrew word chaver, which means connection, or friendship. It's a place to connect to ourselves, but really to the one above us, right? The one that our real sponsor, the one that makes it all happen. And I'm talking about Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm talking about God himself. And we're gonna discuss a lot about the biblical narratives that took place here. And we're gonna talk how we can strengthen that connection to ourselves and to God as well. And Hebron, as I mentioned, is one of the holy cities here in Israel. And sometimes when I say the 4 holy cities of Israel, people think that that there's only these 4 cities that are holy. Every square inch of the Holy Land is holy, but we've elevated 4 of these cities. Jerusalem, first and foremost, the place of the Beit HaMikdash, the holy temple that stood for nearly 1,000 years when you combine the first temple and the second temple, and of course the eternal temple that will be built, please God, in our days and soon, and that is the 3rd temple. And so Jerusalem, first and foremost, is the holy city. Then we have the holy city of Hebron, because this is the place of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And we're going to talk about all 7 of them, right? 3 patriarchs, 4 matriarchs, the mamas and the papas, if you will. And we are also have 2 other cities, right? We said the 4 holy cities. You also have the holy city of Tzfat, which is located in the Upper Galilee on this big, massive mountaintop overlooking the entire area. And that's the city of Kabbalah and mysticism, which is very fitting since it's way up there in the mountains and it's really high up there. And then we also have the city of Tiberias, which is the 4th holy city. Again, we elevate these cities. The only one that is intrinsically higher than all other places is Jerusalem. But Tiberias is also a holy city because that is where the oral tradition, the oral Torah, was codified and finally put down on a piece of parchment. And that was really to save Judaism because of the Roman oppression that was occurring at the time after the destruction of the Second Temple. But our tour today is going to focus on Hebron and the biblical narrative. And in order to discuss that biblical narrative, we need to take a step back in time. Let's go time traveling right now. And we need to go back 3,800 years ago to the birth of Abraham. And Abraham already at the very beginning was a child prodigy of a singular form. There was never anybody like Abraham to come about again. Already at the age of 3, he was only 3 years old, and he was working in his father's idol shop, right? His father was a massive idol worshiper that sold idols, to the ancient world at that time. It was one of the biggest. He was like the Costco of idol worship and idolatry. And he noticed that, all of these idols made out of sticks and stones and, what's going on here? What, these idols, these statues, they can't do anything. Everybody's bowing down and praying before them. And he breaks all of the statues and the stones and the idols. And his father comes back and, Abraham, what are you doing? This is our livelihood. You can't go ahead and destroy this. And he says, it wasn't me. He said, what are you saying? You're the only one here. He says, no, it was that one idol over there. And he's pointing to a very, very large statue. And his father says, what are you talking about? That's just a piece of wood. That can't do anything. And he says, exactly, Father. It can't do anything. These idols are fake. I was at the age of 3. Now, fast forward 72 years, right? We just celebrated Israel's Independence Day. Israel's now 73 years young. But just like a few weeks ago, if we said 72 years later, we could say, hey, Israel's only 72 years old. Fast forward 72 years, Abraham 75, and he gets a nevuah, which is Hebrew for prophecy. And in this prophecy, God speaks to him and he says, Abraham, I want you to lech lecha. I want you to go for yourself. And in order to do that, I want you to leave your father's house. And I want you to leave the land that you're from. And I want you to go to the place that I will show you. I want you to go to I'm not even going to tell you where to go. You'll just know when you get there. And so Abraham takes his family and they go on this long journey. And eventually, they pass over the Euphrates River and they cross over to the other side and they come down from Lebanon and they enter into Eretz Israel. They enter into the land of Canaan, as it was known at that time. And the first place he pitches a tent is actually just a little north of here, into a place called Shechem, which is the burial place. Speaking of tombs, right? It's the burial place of Yosef Sadiq, the righteous one. Joseph, the righteous one, who was sold into slavery, one of the 12 brothers of sons of Jacob, right? The brothers. He was sold into slavery, became the viceroy of Pharaoh and saved the Jewish people, really saved the ancient world at that time, foreseeing through his nevuah and his prophecy and his dreams that the famine that was about to come. And so Yosef is buried in this place called Shechem. But the first permanent place, the first permanent dwelling of Abraham is going to be right here, somewhere out here that I'm looking at. You can see these beautiful olive trees here behind me, and the city that is now modern, the modern city of Hebron, sprawling out on these hilltops over here. But somewhere here on this hilltop, and we're going to see some of those ancient ruins and maybe even some of the ancient stones that was used to build the home that Abraham or Isaac or Jacob lived in. Yes, I'm being serious here. We're going to touch upon history. We're going to touch upon the actual physical artifacts, the structures from those ancient times. Yes, we're going to see that. It's going to be an amazing tour today as we really touch upon the physical reality of the Bible, the proofs of the Bible. And the first place he pitches tent right here in Hebron. And it would be right here, somewhere on these hills, that he'll have that nevuah, that Hashem, God, will speak to him. And he'll say, Abraham, I want you to look up at the skies above you right now, in the middle of the night. I want you to look at all the stars there. And now I want you to look at your feet, and I want you to see all the dust and all the sand that is scattered around the entire world. And I want you to know that your descendants one day will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands that surround the world and touch upon the oceans and the seas. But he doesn't just say that. He says, I want you to look out onto the vastness of the land. Now, we're not at the highest point, but if we're at the highest point around here, you would be able to see all the rolling hills, which are known as Hare Yehuda, the Judean mountains. And I want you to know that this will be given as an inheritance to your descendants, the Jewish people, Leolam Va'ed, forever. This is the Bible. It's written as clear as day, and not just that one time, but numerous times. When people say that the Jewish people have no right to the land, and these are devout, people from various faiths who believe in the Bible, and it's like the Bible says right there that this is going to be an inheritance of the Jewish people forever. This is Jewish land, and that's going to happen right here. Now, we have an exciting tour. We are going to traverse and walk around up and down through the hills here in the next 90 minutes that we have together. And I'm going to show you where many archaeologists believe that the first palace of David HaMelech, King David himself, who resided right here in Hebron for the first 7.5 years of his rulership as king over the Jewish people, over the land of Israel, wasn't in Jerusalem. He'll move to Jerusalem later on, the first 7.5 years, right here in Hebron. I'm going to take you to where those are. We're going to visit a modern cemetery and the first Jewish hospital, modern Jewish hospital that was built here in the late 19th century. And of course, we're going to visit last, but definitely not least, the tomb of the patriarchs, known in Hebrew as Marat Machpelah, the double cave. And I'll explain why it's called the double cave as well. And I wish that we could do it in some type of chronological order, that we're going to go from 3,800 years ago, 1800 BCE, right? I use the term BCE. Some of us, we have a lot of Christian friends who are with us, and a lot of secular friends and people from various faiths as well. I use the term BCE, the academic term oftentimes referred to as BC, which means before Christ, right? But we use BCE, before the Common Era, right? And that's obviously, I'm Jewish, right? I don't believe in Jesus. So I don't use the term BC, before Christ, but rather I use the term BCE, before the Common Era. And so I wish I could start 1800 BCE, but we're gonna like traverse not only the land, but also the timeline of Hebron, as well, as it's not so simple. We're gonna go from place to place in order to give us a fluid walking tour. I'll jump in my car sometimes and drive to a few different places, but we got a great, exciting tour. So come with me and just watch your step here. I got a great cameraman with me today. His name is Merom, and he actually is a student in a yeshiva, in a house of Torah study. He's about 19 years old, and he studies here in Hebron. Come around this side. Just swing around, face me, please. And he is a yeshiva student here in Hebron, in a place called in a yeshiva called Yeshivat Hebron. And he's studying there for a number of years. And then when he's finished his Torah study and he's grounded in his faith, first and foremost, we need to ground ourselves in our spiritual awareness. He's then going to serve in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, for another 3 years. And then when he's done with his service, he'll return to yeshiva for another smaller amount of time, maybe another year and a half, and only then go to university, get married, have children. It's amazing here in Israel the way it works. We have the highest percentage in any other nation in the world for graduates with bachelor's degree, master's degree, and even PhD per capita. It's a small country, only 8 million, but per capita we have the highest percentage of these graduates. But they don't start their studies until they're 23 at least, right? 20, they got to finish the army, yeshiva. Anyhow, what I'm starting off right here is a very important story, one of the most important stories in the Bible, and that is the story of Ruth. We're celebrating a holiday in a month's time, less than a month's time, I believe, called Shavuot. And Shavuot commemorates the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And we're going to read a book within the Bible known as Megillat Ruth, right? Ruth, the righteous convert to Judaism. It also happens to be the great-grandmother of King David. And she is buried right behind me with her grandson, the father of King David, known as Yishai or Jesse. Okay, and this story is so important because it tells the mission statement of the Jewish people is encapsulated in this story. Ruth is interesting. In order to understand where Ruth comes from, we need to go back to the story of Lot, okay? And just come out over here. I just want you to see it because this is amazing. We have 2 young men standing over here underneath a fig tree amongst these ruins that you see here, some of which date back 1,500 years towards the Byzantine period. There's an ancient shul, the building behind me over there, that's an ancient shul. And it's just recently been cleaned out and it's still not finished, but they're once again returning it back to its use as a place of kedusha, which means in English holiness, a place of Torah study, and a place of prayer. But for now, you can see these young men here, and they're literally studying the Bible right now, having a dialogue between one another, discussing the story, getting prepared for Shavuot of the story of Ruth. And in order to understand Ruth, we're going to go back to Abraham. When Abraham leaves Ur Kasdim, which is today Iraq, after his nevuah, that he's supposed to go to the place I'm going to show you, to himself, right, here to the land of Israel, he's going to take his nephew. And his nephew was a man by the name of Lot. And Lot, Abraham's wife, Sarah, are going to go down to Egypt. Maybe you're familiar with the story. We're not going to get so into it. But when they return to the land of Israel, they come back very wealthy and numerous, because when you meet a person of truth, you want to follow that person. And so many people after meeting Abraham said, I want a piece of what you have. I want truth as well. And so all of a sudden his community, blossomed and it grew. And they came here to Eretz Yisrael, and the tribal people of Lot and the tribal people of Abraham begin to fight one another. And Abraham, a man of peace, goes to his nephew and he says, Lot, there's no reason for us to quarrel. This land is big enough for all of us. You choose whatever area you want to go to, and I'll go the other way. You choose first. It's okay, because in the end, Abraham understood it all comes from Shemaim. It all comes from heaven. It all comes from God in the end anyhow. So let's not quarrel with one another. You choose wherever you want to go, and I'll go the other way. And so Lot takes the most fertile area, a place known as Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm sure many of you have heard Sodom and Gomorrah, and you're like, that place doesn't sound so fertile. Wasn't that like, fire and brimstone came down and the whole area was destroyed for its immorality? Yes, you're right. It was, and it's not fertile anymore. It's the area around the Dead Sea. It's dead, okay? Nothing's growing there right now. But at that time, it was very, very lush. It was like almost like a rainforest. Things grew beautifully at that time. And Lot goes there, but of course it was a place of immorality, and we know it was going to be destroyed. But Lot had some meritorious deeds. I mean, he spent a long time with Abraham, and he learned a thing or two. And because of those good merits and those good deeds that he acted on, he was saved with his wife and his 2 daughters. But God gave him one commandment. He says, Lot and your family, I'm going to save you, but don't look back. Don't look back. What an amazing idea. I could just stop right there and it would be worth this tour just to have that in your back pocket. Don't look back. Always be moving forward. We've all made mistakes. Don't dwell on those mistakes, but rather get up, brush off your knees and go forward. Venture forward. And that is what Lot is going to do with his family. But his wife couldn't resist and she turned back. She was turned into a pillar of salt. In fact, you can even see the area in all the salt and the pillars, and one of those is his wife. Well, that night, his 2 daughters and Lot got extremely inebriated. And I don't know how inebriated you need to get to do this, but he must have been pretty inebriated. I don't think there's enough alcohol in the world to get me that inebriated, but he actually sleeps with his daughters. They have relations. And from that relation, these 2 daughters bear children. And one of them had the audacity to name her son Moab, Me'av, which in Hebrew means from my father. Not only did I commit the most illicit relationship in the entire Bible, right? Just last week and every week in synagogues around the world, we read a section and a portion of the Torah. Last week, we talked about permissible and not permissible relationships. And one of those is incest. I mean, we don't need to know that now because it's like obvious. I mean, we get disgusted just about the idea, but maybe in the ancient world, that was something that was commonplace. So this is what happened. And they had a child, and it was Me'av from my father. And this brought about this nation called the Moabites. And the Moabites were so hideous and so disgusting, so terrible that Hashem told the Jewish people they're not allowed to become Jews. At least the men aren't allowed to become Jews. They weren't even allowed to convert. That's how disgusting, that's how low they had become. However, from this nation came a righteous woman by the name of Ruth. And Ruth followed her mother-in-law Naomi to the land of Israel, and she saw the truth in Hashem, the truth in God, and said, you know what, just like those followers of Abraham, she said, I want that. I want to become part of your nation. Your God is my God. Why? Because there is no other God. There's only one God. And she realized that not only intellectually but emotionally and in her heart as well. And she became a righteous convert. She married a man by the name of Boaz. Her and Boaz have a son by the name of Obadiah. And Obadiah has a son by the name of Yishai. Come over here. Remember, we just mentioned that Yishai is buried right over here. Jesse, right? The name Jesse in English, Yishai. And Yishai has 7 children. And one of those, the youngest one, he's got red hair, he's got freckles, he's got these beautiful, peaceful blue eyes, and he's scrawny, and he doesn't look like this warrior. And Yishai was like a man's man, right? A macho guy. And his other sons were big and strong and brawn and were generals and warriors in the first king of Israel, Shaul's army. And Yishai kind of sent David off into the wilderness to shepherd the animals. That's right. David, the greatest king of Israel, the seed of Messiah, came from Yishai and Ruth, who are buried right here. And from that hideous relationship comes the seed of Mashiach, comes the seed of the Messiah, the ultimate destination for all of humanity, came from this ancestral relationship. And why am I bringing this out? Why am I making such a point of this right now and taking up so much of this time? Because I want you guys to be able to take that story, put it into your back pocket and save that and realize that it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter who your parents were, who your grandparents and your great-grandparents. It doesn't even matter what you did 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, 5 seconds ago. What matters the most in Judaism is the here and now and where you are headed towards. Where's your mind? Where are your thoughts? What are your actions? What are you doing today? Don't worry about yesterday. Yesterday is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Only now exists right now. Where are you headed towards? And that's an important thing in Judaism. It's an important thing for all of us to realize, whether we're Jewish or not, that God wants to know where you are holding in this moment. Where are you at this time? So let's just walk here just a little bit. I wish I could take you inside this building, but this is an old Crusader building, and these ruins have been here for over 1,000 years. And inside, the internet would be terrible and we get disconnected immediately, but inside here, you have people also learning Torah and studying. And so we'll just come up here and just walk through this beautiful fig tree that we can see here. And I'm just trying to see if there's any figs growing on the tree right now. But maybe this is a male fig tree. I don't see any figs growing right now on it, but we'll just walk through this beautiful ancient fig tree that we have over here. And as I mentioned before, the ruins of this ancient synagogue. And everyone, just be careful as you step over these stones over here, and maybe just don't go in, but just go as close to the door as possible so the folks over there can see what's going on. All right, that's good enough. Don't go any further. I don't want to disconnect, but you can see it's a work in progress. But this was all filled with debris, and volunteers coming here and taking out all of the material in order that come wintertime, our friends over here who are studying Torah with us right now don't have to sit in the rain and even in the snow. It snows here in Hebron from time to time, but can go inside and study their Torah inside. Now here in Hebron, every square inch of the land of Israel is holy, but here in Hebron, lots of Kedusha, lots of holiness. You'll find people like this gentleman over here, always praying, always connecting to our ancestors, connecting to our roots, remembering where we are from and who we are and the greatness that exists inside of us so that we can be that light upon the nations that we're destined to be. So come follow me. We're going through a little tunnel. So I just stopped speaking there for a minute because these are ancient stones. This isn't a wooden house that is covered with stone. All these ancient buildings here were just built with stones, and they weren't thinking about our future and Wi-Fi and all that kind of good stuff and our signals. So it's not so good on the inside of some of these buildings. But look at these are olive trees that we see over here. You can see all ancient olive trees. Some of these might date 1,000 years old. Olive trees can grow that long. There's a donkey actually in the field. I don't know if you guys could see that, but there's a little donkey in the field over there. And we're just going to come around here, and you can see this metal here to my left. You can see some of the barbed wire that's running along it as well. And this is an army base. And the troops, the soldiers who are stationed here, they rotate to different areas around Israel. They'll serve here from anywhere between 3 and 6 months, usually closer to 6 months. And the reason why they change the troops is so that people don't get into any types of habits and become, I don't want to say careless, but they might not, be so present. And you need to be alert in these areas. And so they rotate them, but this is where their barracks are. This is where they spend the night. This is where their cheder ochel, their dining room, is located. And we'll see some of those soldiers as we're walking through the city of Hebron. Just watch my room. You have a little cord here. I don't want you tripping over it, okay? There's a soldier right now who's on break right now. He's not carrying his weapon. But we're just going to come through here. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm bringing you to a place where we'll walk through a few fields. Oops, let's go this way. Just be careful here because we got some, looks like some renovations that are taking place. Shalom, Yalid, shalom. So great to see the kids here playing. Shalom, shalom. It really is amazing to be able to witness with my own eyes live, but you guys are seeing it here, the fulfillment of that biblical prophecy of the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel, settling once again on the hilltops of and the ruins of our ancestors, and that's literal. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about a little bit later on. But these are some Jewish homes that are over here, and a nice little garden. And oftentimes these places are also in memory, right? We always got to remember those who paid the highest price. So you can see this is called Gan Dagan, right? Major Dagan Vertman, who was killed in one of the operations here in Israel. And it says here during Kasled in Gaza in 2009. And it was funded by the people of Melbourne, Australia. Maybe we have some people from Melbourne, Australia joining us here today. And again, I said, every now and then walking through, you're going to see some security installation or soldier protecting us here right now. But the people here, shalom, shalom aleichem.
David?
Yes, Cheryl.
Do you feel safe?
I feel safe. Yes, I do. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate that. I feel safe because we got this young gentleman right here from Rishon LeZion who is here protecting us. But also, I'm a man of peace and I come in peace. And I feel like when you generate that energy, it's going to reverberate back to you as well. So yes, Cheryl, thank you. I do feel safe. I feel very safe, actually. But we're going to come through this little field here. You can see some vineyards that are being grown here by the local community, and some animals. Go take a look over this. This is great. I mean, we have some sheep over here and some goats that can be used for their wool and for their milk. But I'm taking you guys to a special place, and I gotta tell you, oftentimes when I come here live, I don't come to this location. You know, it's a little bit different when you're with 45 people and a busload of people who are here. You know, you have time to go to the major stops, but with 45 people, it takes a little longer to get from point A to point B. So I am taking you to this beautiful lookout. And as we're walking, you're going to notice that there's this clearing, a flat area. Now, Hebron is on the minds of the international community, whether it's the religious community or other parts of our beautiful world community. And so this area is this is sacred ground, and I'm going to tell you why. But, oh, I just stepped on a thorn. Maybe that's the only thing I'm not safe from are the thorns in this area. But this flattened area here, just swing around that side if you could. Yep, go over there and just swing around, face me. And this is believed, the reason it's flattened out, this is believed to be where King David's palace stood. And why here? So we were just on the top of the hill, and this is where ancient people settled. They settled in the valleys were used for agriculture, because that's where the soil will collect. That's where the water always goes to the lowest point possible. That's where the reservoirs were built. That's where the irrigation could take place. But the people lived on top of the hill because that's also one way in which they could protect themselves. How are they protecting themselves? Well, we've all played that game, King of the Hill, or at least I did when I was a kid. And you'd be on top of a mound of dirt or something like that, and your friends are trying to knock you off, and you're smacking them, pushing them, and knocking them over and kicking them down. Why do you have such an advantage? Because you're higher up. So in the ancient world, the higher you could settle, the safer you were. And the people here settled on top of the hill. And what was King David's palace looking out over? Well, you can see some of these ancient olive trees. And just look at that one over there. That one's got a big old trunk. That's got to be at least 1,000 years old. And I'm not kidding. That is an ancient olive tree. Very beautiful over there. But in this valley over here, this was a field back in the day, in the days of Abraham, right? Abraham Avinu. Abraham, our forefather. And that is where the cave was in which he purchased to bury his wife Sarah. And that is Marat Machpelah. So King David is sitting here in his palace right here, looking out onto that valley and seeing our forefathers and our foremothers where they are buried. Hebron, Chibur, connection, friendship, love. Hebron, my friends, Hebron. I don't keep on saying Hebron. I think by now you've gotten it that means Hebron in English, right? Hebron is a city of romance. Today, we think of Hebron as being a city of violence, but it's not a city of violence. It's a city of connection, of brotherly love. It's not Philadelphia, it's Hebron. And what do I mean by a city of romance? Well, think about it. This is a love story between two people, Abraham and Sarah, who give birth to a holy family, Isaac and Jacob and the 12 tribes of Israel. And they will give birth to a nation, the Jewish nation, the Israelites, the Jewish people. This is a city of love. And it's also the city of humanity. What do I mean by that? Well, according to Jewish tradition, the reason why, we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well, that Abraham wanted to bury Sarah in that specific cave, and we're going to talk about the story in just a little bit, exactly where he purchased it. We actually know archaeologically, scientifically, the exact location in which Abraham stood and purchased the cave. But the reason why he wanted that specific cave is that is where, according to Jewish tradition, Adam and Eve are buried. The first man and woman are buried. So the birth of humanity, of humans with souls, right? We believe that 5,781 years ago on the Jewish calendar, the God breathed a soul into man, and we no longer were animals. We became humans with souls and a way to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So the birth of humanity takes place here, and then you have Abraham and Sarah and the forefathers and the foremothers who give this ethical monotheism, right? The belief in one God, but the ethics that go along with it. The Western values that we hold true today come from the Bible, come from these biblical stories. So you have the purpose of humanity, right? You have our ethics. But not only that, I'm standing on King David's palace, which is the seat of Messiah, in Hebrew, Mashiach. It's the seat of Messiah, which is the ultimate destination for mankind, when everything will be peaceful here in our world. And so we have the entire span of human destiny, from Adam and Eve to our biblical patriarchs and matriarchs, to David and Melech and the seed of Messiah and our ultimate destination, all taking place right here in Hebron. Now, come over here. I just want to show you something very, very cool. I'm looking down the ground. I want to find a good piece, but there is pottery literally all over the place here. Here's a nice big piece that I can show you. Check this out, right? Come on, there you go. There you go. Don't worry. Oh, you're doing a great job, Miron. You see this nice piece of pottery right here. It's ancient pottery. This is Jewish. This is Jewish pottery here. Now, this might date back all the way to the days of King David 3,000 years ago, or maybe it dates back to the days of Abraham 3,800 years ago, or maybe it only dates back to the Second Temple period 2,000 years ago. But that's an ancient piece of pottery right there. You just pick it up on the ground. It's everywhere because this was the trash. When you broke your plate, what did you do? You just threw it. You just threw it on the ground. So all over the place, you see this ancient pottery from thousands of years of people living here that just, it became the stones in the ground. But why is this archaeology important? Why are these pieces of pottery? This pottery, if they're going to do an archaeological excavation, it'll all be sent to a place where it's going to be washed and inspected and looked at in order to see if there's writing on it, in order to learn more about the customs and the cost of goods at that time. Maybe somebody wrote down, so-and-so owes me, $10 or 10 shkalim, right? The same word that we use for money in the biblical times, the same word that we use now, cost 10 shekels. So now we know that this animal would cost 10 shekels. But I'm going to show you something. I don't usually wear this necklace, but I put it on specifically for this tour. And what I have hanging from there is an ancient coin, okay? You got that there, Meron? That's an ancient coin. And in Hebrew, it says, Herut, for the redemption of Zion. This is a 2,000-year-old coin in perfect condition. This is a 2,000-year-old coin. It's also referred to as the Masada coin. And that coin talks about the Jewish people 2,000 years ago fighting against the Romans for our liberation and our freedom in our land. This connects me to the past. This pottery connects me to the past. This view connects me to the past. It doesn't just connect me to the past. It connects me to who I am, because Abraham is my great, 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 however great to go, grandfather. And if you're a believer in God, even if you aren't genetically, he's not your great, great grandfather, he's your spiritual grandfather. And that's something to feel good about, to be able to connect with him, be able to come here. Who would want to come here and walk in the footsteps of your spiritual, or in my case, physical and spiritual great, great grandfather, right here in the city of Hebron? Come with me. If you guys were with me on the tour of the path of the patriarchs, which was the way of that Abraham and our forefathers traveled from Hebron to Jerusalem, we visited an ancient mikvah. So I don't think I need to take you to an ancient mikvah right now, but just down this hill, there's a spring, just an ancient spring that was used as a mikvah probably by Abraham, because it's the only spring right here. And so when you need to ritually or even physically clean yourself, that was the water source for the top of this hill, ancient Hebron at that time. Sure, later on they built cisterns and they collected water, but in ancient times, that was the original water source right there, that spring, and it's still flowing to this very day. Absolutely awesome, really amazing. How blessed are we to walk through these beautiful olive trees over here, which also, if you remember from our tour, from our tour, Path of the Patriarchs, I won't go through the whole story again. You guys will have to get a link to that tour, but the olive branch doesn't necessarily represent peace in Judaism, it represents freedom. So here we are walking free in our own land, here in the land of Israel, in the holy city of Hebron. Passing by on our left-hand side again, we have the sheep and the goats. We have the vineyards over here to the right-hand side.
We have some questions for you, David.
Sure, you got it. Let me just point out here, we got some chickens over here, or maybe these are roosters. I can never tell which is which. Shalom. All right, Shal, let me hear it.
All right. So where you were standing before, if that's where the palace was, why aren't there more walls, etc.?
Walls from the palace?
Yes.
So there are, and archaeologists believe that if we had the permission, we don't have the permission, first of all. Well, first and foremost, we don't have the permission from the Israeli government. And the reason why we don't have the permission from the Israeli government is that if we came in here with, the equipment and start excavating and unearthing more physical evidence of the Jewish presence here in Hebron, most of these houses that you can see all around the valley, this is, mostly Arab, right? Most of Hebron is Arab. You would have riots and people protesting. So you have to weigh out. And the government, it's a tough decision. Do we conduct these excavations to bring more of our biblical truths to light, but at a risk of human life? And human life in Judaism is the utmost importance. So we can't just do always what we want, because we know that this is gonna we're gonna have to pay with human life. And we're not willing to do that. So that's the reason why you don't see it. But we have that ground penetrating radar, and they've come here and they've surveyed the area, and it is believed that the walls of those ancient palaces, whether it was King David or it was rebuilt later on, exist over there. However, in Jerusalem, maybe one day we'll do a tour there, in the city of David, they have found and they have excavated the walls of King David's palace in the city of David. And that is a tremendous find, obviously. So here we are, and you can see this nice little playground, and you guys have already seen some children walking here, and you can see the Jewish people who have returned here to the land of Israel, here in the city of Hebron. But obviously here in Israel, not every story is so, I don't want to say, sometimes there's tragedy here. We have tragedy. Unfortunately, we have terrorism in 1998, after the Y Accord. If anybody wants to look it up, WYE, the Y Accord of 98, which kind of divided Hebron. You had Jewish sections, you had Arab sections. A terrorist from the hill just a little bit beyond here came over here and broke into one of these homes. I don't think that the terrorist knew whose home he was going into, but he ended up going into a home of a very, very important rabbi, a spiritual leader here in Hebron, really a spiritual leader of the Jewish people. And his name was Rav Shlomo Ra'anan. And he was the grandson of the first chief rabbi of Israel before there was even a state. And I'm talking about Rav Kook. He was the grandson of Rav Kook. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with who Rav Kook is. And he broke into this home, and unfortunately, he stabbed Rav Shlomo Ra'anan to death. And here in Israel, when somebody is killed from terrorism, the state tries to console the individual with some type of financial assistance. And this was a big story. It was all over the headlines here in Israel. And Bibi Netanyahu, even way back in '98, was the prime minister back then. He wasn't the prime minister. Hasn't been continuously the prime minister. He had a little hiatus, but he was prime minister at that time. And he came with a very, very sizable check to Rav Shlomo Ra'anan's wife and said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. And it's a tragedy, not just for you, for all the Jewish people. I realize that this isn't, you can't exchange money for a life, but hopefully it'll give you some type of assistance and comfort." And she took this check, a sizable check. And, Bibi Netanyahu was a master of publicity. And so, there was the TV cameras and the whole publicity, not the propaganda, what is it? The entourage, I forgot what they call the people who take the pictures. And she took it and she ripped it up. She said, "I don't want your money. What we need are houses to live in, not trailers that anybody could just kick down the door. We need solid homes. Let us build." They took the life of my husband, who was a Talmid Chacham, which means was a Torah giant, an intellectual of biblical knowledge. I want to produce, for his one loss, I want to produce 10 more. Let me build a yeshiva right here. And they gave her permission. They built this modern building. You see up here. And I can hear the noise right now. There's a yeshiva there, a house of study for smicha, which is biblical rabbinic ordination. In order to become a rabbi, you have to go through training, obviously. Not everybody can just say, "I'm a rabbi." They have to go through a lot of studying, years and years and PhD of Jewish philosophy. But when they were building this modern building, come check this out. I'm gonna take the camera real quick here. Check out these ruins that they found over here. Okay, these ruins and the archaeology that was discovered here dates back to the first temple period through carbon dating and other forms of technology that they were able to decipher that. Look at that. That's a silo right there, silo, where they would store grain inside. And these were the homes of people who lived in Hebron at least 3,000 years ago. And if these are the homes from 3,000 years ago, do you think that they just built new homes in the middle of nowhere? Of course not. They built their homes on top of the ruins of the homes that were there before. They renovated the homes that were there before, which means that Abraham himself, Isaac, who lived here, he was born right here in Hebron, Jacob, who lived over here, they all might have lived right here in this neighborhood. Now I'm going to give the camera back over to my friend here in my home. And we're just going to walk over here, and I am about to just, if your minds aren't blown yet, they're about to be blown, because I'm about to show you something that may be one of, for sure, because there's a lot of them, but one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. What we have over here is an ancient wall. Okay, there's two walls. There's a wall over here to the left, and there's a wall over here to the right. The one over there to the right is a more modern wall. That wall over there is probably first temple period. It's only maybe about 3,000 years old. But the one over here to the left, that one is about 4,500 years old, which means it dates prior to the days of Abraham. Abraham comes here 3,800 years ago. This is 4,500 years old, 700 years older. And what you have right next to the wall are stairs that are leading up to a city gate. Now, we can read in the Bible, and not just the Bible, not just Jewish sources. We know that in the ancient world, business dealings were done in the most public place possible. They were done exchanges, right? Exchanges were very big back then. It wasn't such a common thing to buy something, barter, yes, but not, So over here, what you have is the city gates of the ancient, not Israeli, because it's just Abraham at the time, but a Hittite city. If you know your Bible, you know that the Hittites were one of the various people who migrated here to the land of Israel from Africa. And the Hittites was ruled by a mayor at the time by the name of Ephron. And Abraham, after his wife Sarah dies at the age of 127, will come to the city gates of the city of the Hittite city, where Ephron is the mayor, and he will purchase it. But when Ephron, right here, we know, like scientifically, these are the stairs that Abraham walked upon to that city gate over there in order to purchase the cave to bury his wife Sarah. And Ephron sees this guy who's, running the biggest, monotheistic cult, the biggest new religion here, literally tens of thousands of followers. And he sees this great man, this holy man, Abraham, approaching the city gate. And he knows that his wife Sarah, this Sadiq, this righteous woman, in order to bury her, and the rumor's already out that he wants that cave down in the field. And so Ephron walks out, the mayor, this Hittite, and says, "Hey, Abraham, let's be friends. Let's be friends. I want you to take that cave for free." And he says, I want you to take the city gate for free. Not city gate, I'm sorry. He wanted to take that cave for free. And he says, "I can't take that for free. I don't want it for free. I want to make sure that everybody knows for generations to come that I purchased this. Give me a price. Tell me what you want for it." And he says, "I want 400 silver shekels." A shekel was a form of weight. Okay, we also call our money shekels today. In fact, that shekel that I showed you on my this was called a shekel ancient times. Modern day coins look just like that. Just same design, just like that. Same Hebrew writing on it too. And 400 shekels, we know from the weight, and we found ancient weights. We know how much it weighed, and the silver at that time was probably about $1 million. Abraham was a wealthy man. He paid $1 million for a cave in the middle of a field that nobody was using. Ephron ripped him off. And Jews throughout the centuries, we've been known as great negotiators. Well, he didn't negotiate. He said, "I'll pay full value, whatever you ask." And he paid those 400 shekels, and he purchased that cave, the bottom of the hill, in order to bury his wife. Come, let's head now to a special place. We're going to jump in my car. We got a little bit of walking. So Cheryl, if you got any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Definitely do. Are there any efforts towards coexistence between the Palestinian population of Hebron and the Jewish population in the area?
Excellent question. Yeah, thank you. So yes, there are many efforts, and have been many efforts throughout the generations. Again, it's so funny that you should be asking this question right now, because this past week in our synagogues around the world, we read a portion of the Torah in which it says that we should be kind to the ger amongst us, to the stranger amongst us, because you are a stranger in a strange land. Speaking of when we went down to Egypt. And so it's really a biblical commandment to be kind to those who live amongst us, who maybe not be the same as us, but they are, right? We all bleed red. They are, right? Shalom. Toda rabah, l'sharot shecha. Toda. Another soldier over here, 20 years old, protecting us.
I appreciate thanking them.
Yes, 100%. So our efforts, in fact, in my shul, and I live here in Gush Etzion, not far from Hebron, we had a guest speaker, and I know we were talking about this when we were discussing our tour, and the founder of Roots, I forgot what his name, Rav Hanan something or another, maybe you're familiar with it, which does a lot of activity trying to build relations between Jews and Muslim Arabs. And he spoke about his efforts and what goes on here. So there are a lot of grassroots organizations. I live in a city of Efrat. The mayor, Oded Ravivi, every Sukkot, right, where we build the tabernacles, the booths, every Sukkot, well, we build sukkahs, and we resign them. He invites our Palestinian, brothers and sisters, our cousins over here, to sit in the sukkah in peace alongside us. And oftentimes many of them do come. Efrat, the community I live in, is one of the few communities there's no fence around it. There's no fence. We don't want to live in cages. We want to live in peace. And when you come in peace, usually people will reverberate peace back to you. So we do not come with aggression, right? It's called the Israeli Defense Forces. We come if we need to defend ourselves, but we are never the aggressors. And there is a lot of this activity to bring peace amongst our friends. Shalom Aleichem. Toda Rabba. Mamash toda. Here is a gate that goes into Hebron. Jews are not allowed past this gate, right? Only certain areas that we're allowed in. But this is where, and I forgot the gentleman's name. This is the Givati, by the way. These soldiers are Givati. They have different berets on their heads, different colors that you know what troops are in. My son is only 6, but he already knows that he wants to be in Givati when he gets older. I think that's really because his Purim, which is like the Jewish, I shouldn't say that. Oftentimes people say it's a Jewish Halloween, but it has nothing to do with Halloween, whatever, but we do dress up in costumes. And he had a costume and it was a Givati soldier. So now he's all about Givati. But they are protecting that gate right there. And sometimes there are incidents there at that gate, unfortunately. I see it's already 6 o'clock. There was a lot more that I really kind of wanted to discuss, but here, I'm going to take this. I want to head over to the Tomb of the Patriarchs, but I want to just show you this building over here, this beautiful building. It's called Beit Hadassah. And some of you are probably familiar with Hadassah Hospitals here in Israel, specifically in Jerusalem. We have 2 main ones, but this is the first Beit Hadassah, the first Jewish hospital. And it was funded and continues to be funded in part by the Hadassah Women, a women's organization that raises money for the hospitals here in Israel in order to provide good, proper, modern, and really groundbreaking medical services for the not just Jewish community, but for the entire community that lives here, including the Arab community. And that's not new to these days. Back when this was built in the late 19th century, here, take a look at these kids here hanging out, right? So shalom. That's great. And this building over here, you can kind of see it a little bit. Let me get this. This is where my cameraman Meron studies, that building right there. The nice little white top was my finger right there. That is the Yeshivat Hebron, which was a very, very well-known yeshiva way back in the day. Also, hundreds of years, since the days of Abraham, basically Jews have been here, except for one small period of time, which maybe I'll talk about for a minute. But this Beit Hadassah was really a place where Jewish doctors and Arab doctors and Jewish patients and Arab patients were treated, brothers and sisters, arm in arm. Jews and Arabs got along. They trusted their children with one another, allowed them to babysit their kids. But this all came to an end, unfortunately, in 1929. There were riots here in Hebron in 1929, where the Arabs that were living here took up arms against the Jewish people. And not arms, but rather like gardening equipment and gardening equipment. Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we keep losing you. The Wi-Fi there is the best.
Okay, fine. We're gonna hopefully be in an area that's more open now, so hopefully it's gonna be okay. I was just speaking that there was a lot of coexistence that was here, except there was an Arab leader by the name of Sheikh Husseini. And Sheikh Husseini, who was like the leader of the Arab people here in the land of Israel for decades, in the early and almost to the mid 20th century, 1900s, who incited a lot of hatred. And he incited riots in 1929. And the Arabs took up arms against the Jewish people and killed 67 innocent men, women, and children, some of them neighbors and friends that just viciously turned on them. Here we have some soldiers here protecting the Shalom, Tada. And 67 Jews were killed. And the British who were ruling this area, it was the British mandate at that time, the British who were ruling this area didn't go to their population and say, hey, you can't behave that way. It's not right to kill innocent men, women, and children who did nothing to you. Rather, they went to the Jewish community and said, it's not safe for you to be here anymore. And they forcibly evicted the Jewish community. And for the first time since the days of Abraham, my friends, 1929, the first time Jews weren't living here in Hebron until 1967, when we were able to liberate it in the Six-Day War, which we're about to talk about. So come with me.
We have a question about military service, which seems to be
Great.
appropriate
Let's hear it.
timing.
Sure.
And the youth there, what is, could you tell us again about the education/military service for young people in Israel?
Sure. Well, those are two independent questions. Everybody here, for the most part, serves in the military. And so it's a conscript army, I guess you could say, but most people want to go and they try out for the best units and do the best that they can. And that starts at the age of 18 after high school. So you serve until you're 21. A lot of people will go into commander school or sign on for an extra year. So if you're an officer, you have to serve another year. So that's 4 years already. And some people will serve much longer than that. And so there's another program called Hesder, which I mentioned before, which is what our camera guy's in, which incorporates Torah study with military service. So you learn Torah for 2 years, then you serve in the army for 2 years, and then you go back to learning Torah for another 1.5 years before going on to your higher or secular studies, to learn a profession. People go to school here, unlike in America, where a lot of times people pick the schools that they want to go to based on the sports or on is it a party school or not. Here, people go to school primarily to get an education in order to earn a living eventually. Just X that out if it's yeah. We're in America, most people go for 5 years, right? So most people here graduate in 3 years. And most the education here is, Hebrew University in Jerusalem is one of the top 100 universities anywhere in the world. And as an Israeli, when you go there, maybe you pay somewhere, maybe $3,000 for the entire year. So tuition is also heavily subsidized here as well. If you're an elite unit, it's even further subsidized, even free. So education here is very affordable and available, not just to Jews, but to all citizens, right? All citizens. In fact, oftentimes here, it's often easier for Arabs to get into these universities as Israel is taking a concerted effort in order to elevate the education in the Arab sectors, more professionals, more money, more affluence, and hopefully as a result, less crime. Israel's no different than any other place. Usually those who are committing crimes need some finances. You don't steal something if you don't need to steal it, right? So so there's a concerted effort for that as well. So I hope that answered the question a little bit, but I want to talk about this beautiful building that's behind me right now. This is known as Marat Machpelah, the double caves. And this is the burial place of our patriarchs and our matriarchs. Now, the building wasn't here at the time when Abraham buried Sarah. Forget all these stones, the bricks. This was just a field, and there was just a cave in the ground, and that's where Sarah was buried. It was only like, 1,800 years later, roughly the turn of the eras, right? Before the Common Era, during the reign of King Herod, right? King Herod, by the way, great builder. We call him Herod the Horrible. He was a terrible human being, a terrible, terrible person, killed lots of innocent people. We do not like King Herut, but he did do a lot of great building, including the Western Wall and the temple in Jerusalem, Masada, Caesarea, and he built this building here. In fact, this is the oldest building that's still in active use to this day, and he built it around the cave in order to build a memorial. And that's why when you come close, come with me, when you come close to these stones, you think you're at the Western Wall. Like if we come up here just a little bit and be careful, everyone, just watch your footsteps. If we came here, you would think right now I'm reporting live from the Western Wall in Jerusalem. You know, if I wanted to do a Western Wall story, I could just come here rather than Jerusalem because it looks exactly the same bordering, same hedging, built the same way by King Herut, just like he built in Jerusalem, he built here as well. This was his signature stone. And the reason why this is in such good shape is one, there's not so many earthquakes, or not as many earthquakes as we have in Jerusalem, but also Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. This was never destroyed. Whether it was the Christians who conquered this area during the Byzantine or Crusader period, they didn't destroy Hebron because they also wanted to connect to Abraham, or whether it was the Muslims who also look as Abraham as an ancestor of theirs. We know Abraham had Isaac, but he also had Yishmael. And Yishmael, according to us and according to the Arabs, was the father of the Arab nation. So, so they also revered Abraham and came to his tomb, which in a little bit, you're going to see a video of the inside of this building. I can't take you in there because the internet's not so good, but you'll see the inside and you'll see where the Arabs pray inside. So just be careful coming over here. And speaking of the Arabs here in Hebron, so various times that the Arabs conquered this area, various times that the Christians also conquered this area, they didn't allow the Jews inside to pray at the tombs. They only allowed them 7 steps high to the main door, the entranceway to the Marat Machpelah, to the tombs themselves, which is now on the other side of those shrubberies, right? Kind of hid it off a little bit because of the negative connotation, the memory of 700 years the Muslims ruled this area and only allowed us to come this far, which is why you can still see this gentleman learning, praying, saying Tehillim, women here as well, burning candles here that have literally blackened the walls from centuries of people coming here and lighting candles in memory of our patriarchs and our matriarchs. So when did we finally able to go back into the building? So 1967, we liberate Jerusalem and the old city. Today we celebrate as Jerusalem Day, and that night, they liberate the mountains surrounding the area of Jerusalem, Hare Yehuda, the mountains of Judea, the Judean mountains. This is where I live in Gush Etzion, where the path of the patriarchs that we went on that tour was located. And Rav Shlomo Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF, gave this wonderful pep talk to the soldiers. You know, we liberated Jerusalem and we're going to go from victory to victory, from holy to holy, from the holy city of Jerusalem to the holy city of Hebron. And we're going to be able to liberate the place that we have not been able to enter for 700 years in order to pray at the grave of our ancestors. And he says, tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn, we're going to rise up and we're going to bring our tanks and we're going to bring the troops and we're going to go to Hebron and I will be with you with my Sefer Torah. He went everywhere during the war. He had a Sefer Torah with him. And what happened was that he woke up in the morning, he didn't see any soldiers, and he thought that they left already. So he got his driver and he took off for Hebron. And he gets to Hebron, he still didn't see any soldiers. He says they must be inside the city. So he goes inside the city, no soldiers. Next thing you know, him and his driver, they start to get a little nervous because they're all alone and they're in a city filled with Arabs. But he notices outside the window these white towels and these white sheets, which means surrender. The mayor of Hebron told the population, let's just surrender. Let there not be any bloodshed, because if there's going to be bloodshed and we lose, they will do to us what we did to them in 1929. Now, contrary to some beliefs in the way that Israel's portrayed in the media, that's not our style. We don't, we don't go after people in that way. But nonetheless, they surrendered. And Rav Shlomo Goren came right here and he went to those doors and he pounded on the doors, and the imam, the religious leader, the Muslim leader, who is it? It's Rav Shlomo Goren from the IDF, Jews aren't allowed inside. Well, that's no longer the case, he says, son, because this is now in Jewish control. Well, we can't find the keys. We can't find the keys to the door. He says, no problem, I can take care of that. He takes out his Uzi. opens up the locks, enters into the building. The mayor of Hebron comes there. He tries to surrender Hebron officially here in the Marat Mechpelah, in the tomb of the patriarchs. He says, this is a holy place. What you're doing is a military thing. Let's do that in City Hall. This is a place for us to pray, and not pray as individuals, but pray together, talking about coexistence and people. And they sat there and they prayed together to our patriarchs for the peace of Hebron, for the peace of Jerusalem, really for the peace of all of us, which we're still praying to this day, and hopefully we'll have one day. So what I want to do right now is send it over to Lee. And Lee, if you could, you have a link, because I can't go in the building because the internet is not good there. So if you could, go ahead and play that video for our friends who are tuning in right now. And then I'll come back and we can finish up this tour on time, okay?
All right, guys, we're inside.
Can you let me know if we have sound?
The building right now, and as I stated,
We do.
Thank you.
The internet here is terrible, so I pre-recorded this, but this is as live as it can get. And I recorded this video about an hour and a half before our live tour. Now, you noticed as we came inside that we have a lot of stairs, so we're above ground right now. In Jews, we bury our dead 6 feet under. We bury our dead in the ground. And that's just ash to ash, dust to dust. We want to return our body, which was made.
Oh, I knew this.
Element, our soul being godly material, goes to Shemaim, goes to heaven, goes up above, and our bodies, earthly material, we want to put it back in the ground where it came from. So the burial plots over here cannot be exactly where our ancestors, our forefathers and foremothers are buried, but what we do have is the grave marker in English known as a cenotaph, or in Hebrew, it's Zion, right? So it's Zion, Abraham Avinu, the Zion, the grave marker, the cenotaph of Abraham, our forefather. And it's really just inside this room right here. You can see a little bit over here. Interestingly enough, you can see that there's a bulletproof mirror over there. I can see inside over there. There are little Muslims on the other side who are also praying here to be close to Abraham, also their forefather, especially now being the month-long holiday of Ramadan, holiday of Ramadan for the Arabs. So this is a very busy time for the Arabs to be praying here as well. And throughout the entire building here, we have the cenotaphs of these 6 grave markers of our forefathers and foremothers. We have Abraham, who's over here, and we have his wife Sarah, who's buried over here. You can see the grave marker here, the Zion, Sarah Amenu, right? The grave marker, the cenotaph of Sarah, our foremother. But interestingly, is in this room, you can see there's Arabic inscription, okay? And we mentioned earlier that Hebron was conquered by many, many different peoples. It's one of the reasons why the building itself, its structure built by King Herut, lasted for so long, is unlike in Jerusalem, where it was destroyed. Here, the people just wanted to take it over. Now, you can see this interesting architecture over here, this red, white, red, white, red, white architecture over here. Now, this was built by the Mamluks, as we talked about in the 13th century, roughly about 700 years ago. And they had this very, very particular way of building. And you can see this in the Old City in Jerusalem and different parts around Israel, of using this red stone, white stone, red stone, white stone, and obviously a very, very beautiful style of architecture. And lasted a very long time, still around right now. And who were these people? These people were known as the Mamluks who built the structure over here, this red light, red light, red light. And the Mamluks, very interesting people. Believe it or not, they were actually kidnapped. What do I mean kidnapped? During the second jihad, the great jihad, where the Arab nations coming out of the Middle East conquered much of Europe, they actually stole, they snatched, they kidnapped, they stole young children, the age of 3, 4 years old, from their families, brought them back to Cairo, which was the center of the Arab people at that time, and trained them to be like samurai, to be these ultimate warriors in order to protect the Sultan, in order to protect the throne of Egypt at that time. Well, when the emperor, when the Sultan died, they realized that they were the ones with the guns, and you had a military coup. Okay, there was no guns back then, but they were the ones with the weapons and the know-how of how to use them. Nobody could defeat them. They took over these white Europeans who were Muslims. They were trained to know. They believed in Muslim ideology, and they believed in one God, but they were born as Christians in Europe, and they were snatched and kidnapped and trained as warriors, and in fact, they were some of the best swordsmen and cavalrymen in the history of mankind. Everybody knows Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, who, the Mongols, who almost conquered the entire known world, they were defeated by the Mamluks here in Israel, just outside of Tiberias. And they're the ones that are going to build this whole section on top of the building. They're going to put a whole nother section on top of the old section, right? You have the old section underneath me right here. And then underneath this, you'll have also rooms, and underneath that is where the cave is located, where the tomb of the Patriarchs and the Matriarchs. But they build these pillars that you can see over here, and the entrance, and the halls in which the Cenotaph, again, it's just the Cenotaph, the grave markers of our ancestors and our forefathers and our foremothers are located. And just like we had the mezuzah, when we came in here, every door has a mezuzah, and this one's really beautiful. It doesn't say Gan Eden, it says Yaakov and Leah, because this is the hall where Yaakov and Leah are buried. And so you can see over here, again, just like we saw in the other hall, Zion, Yaakov, Amen, right? The Zion, the grave marker, the cenotaph of our forefather, Yaakov, who was also known as Israel. He was also given a second name, Israel. So we can see the importance of this place. It's not just our forefathers, but even the name Israel, was the name Israel come from, is also buried right here. And this is why Israel goes to great lengths in order to protect this area. And it's so important to us of who we are, because obviously this is the patriarchs and the matriarchs who are buried here. Also, where the name Israel comes from is buried right here. Yaakov is also known as Israel. And then just like with Abraham, and just like with Sarah, the twin cenotaphs, here you have the Zion of Leah, Amen, right? Of Leah, our foremother. Now, Yaakov, Israel, had two wives, right? He had Leah, and there was also Rachel. And Rachel died in childbirth and was buried between Bethlehem, and Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. And her grave's still there and is visited by hundreds of thousands of people every single year, just like the tombs over here are buried. Now, if you're counting, you know that we've only visited 4 cenotaphs, but there should be 6 grave markers. The other 2 being, the middle generation of you, the child of Abraham, Ekades Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And Isaac and his wife Rebecca are buried on the other side here. Now it's closed to us, and these are bulletproof windows over here. It's closed to us all but 10 days out of the year, and those 10 days is during the Chol Moed period, the in-between days of Pesach and Sukkot, as well as Chaya Sarah for that Shabbat, the parsha that talks about the actual burial of Sarah. But we can see a picture over here. This is what they look like, and I can actually hear the Arabs and the Muslims on the other side praying right now. I can hear them on the other side of this door. And from here, there's a very famous opening and a shaft. You can see this girl being dropped down through this. Roughly, I think it was probably almost 40 years ago, maybe, was dropped down in here, and some pictures were taken, and you can actually see the cave and some of the ancient pottery and the materials. And you can see here's a diagram of it, of where the actual tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs were actually located. And of course, as we mentioned before too, underneath that, the double cave. You have the one cave of patriarchs and the matriarchs, but underneath that, and according to Jewish tradition, is where Abraham, is where Adam and Eve, right? First man and woman. Was it first man and woman, right? The first breath of godliness into our earthly bodies was given. Not to say that there weren't animals, literally, who looked like us, like Homo sapiens, but they didn't have that soul. They didn't have that godly soul. They didn't have that part of Hashem, of God with them inside. And so Adam and Eve were the first ones to be given that. And so this is the inside of the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. It's really unbelievable. But let's head out right now, and we'll wrap up the tour. It's been a pleasure bringing you guys in here. Let's go. All right, guys, we're inside the building right now. And as I stated before, the internet here is terrible. So I pre-recorded.
All right, you guys can see me?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. I hope you guys appreciated that experience inside. Again, these are very, very thick stones over. These are Herodian stones. These are 2,000 years old. They didn't have Wi-Fi back then. So they were a little bit inconsiderate of our future concerns and needs. So I pre-filmed that, as I said, just maybe an hour and a half prior to our live tour here together. Now, the video that was shown to you, I think that it was only a partial of the video. If you guys want to see that video, you can go to my YouTube channel if you guys are on there, or I'll send it over to the Atlanta Israel Coalition and they could send it out to you as well. But my YouTube channel is David Sussman Israel Tours. It's very, very easy to remember. And you guys could check that out when we're done here. Before I share what I want to close with, I want to remind you, because I can see so many people have actually come during the tour, like the numbers just keep on going up. And thank God for that. It just shows us how many of you enjoy the programming from the Atlanta Israel Coalition and how important Hebron is to you and Israel is to you. So if you have, obviously you have the will, but if you have it in the wallet as well, and you can give generously to the Atlanta Israel Coalition so that they can bring you more of this type of programming, whether it's a live virtual tour, whether it's Q&As, go to their Facebook site. You'll see, every day there's posts, content about Israel, information about what's happening over here. So if you're a lover of Zion like I am, you need to like their page, be in touch with them, give them feedback, and let them know the good and the bad as well of today's tour so that we can continue to bring you as good, if not even better content in the future. So please go ahead, see them. There's a donate button, there's an email, and whatever you can give will be greatly appreciated. And that blessing, I can promise you, because it's written right there in the Torah, will be reverberated and bounce back right at you. God promises those who bless the descendants of Abraham will be blessed themselves as well. And if you could do the survey that will be sent out to you, it would be appreciated, really, really appreciated. So as we close here and the sun is setting in the beautiful holy city of Hebron, and we see some of the yeshiva students and my wonderful cameraman who is here studying right now, and the soldiers that we saw, we have all of them to thank, and to the people who live here for making it safe for people like you and I when we come visit here, that we can come to the city of Hebron, that we can feel safe, that we can come in peace, leave in peace, and hopefully live in peace with our brothers and our sisters as well. So I am available to take questions from anybody who has. And if you need to go, because I know it's been an hour and a half already, I just want to say shalom. Shalom from the city of romance, the city of love between two individuals, Abraham and Sarah, who beget a holy family, a biblical family. We're talking about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, who gave birth to a holy nation, the Jewish nation. And may we continue to live and prosper in our land, and may we have peace within our borders. Thank you to Cheryl. Thank you to Lee. Thank you to the entire Atlanta Israel Coalition. And I'm happy to take questions via Cheryl.
Wonderful, because we have questions. So you're speaking of
Good.
visiting and being there based on COVID restrictions. Do you know when we can actually, as Americans, come to Israel?
So as Americans and as anyone around the world, as we have viewers from all over the place, anyone who is vaccinated, who is on a program, now that program could be 2 individuals or it could be 100 individuals. In other words, you need to hire a company who is in charge of you, who knows where you are, who is aware of your itinerary, so that God forbid, if there's an outbreak of COVID, we can track down where it possibly could be coming from. So if you're vaccinated, you have proof of that, beginning May 23rd. And I will tell you, Cheryl, and everybody else, thank the good Lord, after a year of not having anybody contact me, my inbox is filling up with people with requests to visit the land of Israel with me, and synagogues and organizations, and also the Atlanta Israel Coalition is looking to do a future tour. So as a community, I would love to be able to bring you all and to do this tour live, not just here in Hebron, not just on the path of the patriarchs, and our future tours. So I hope that you guys will join us next month on Sunday, May 23rd. Go ahead and mark that on your calendar right now, that you'll join us for the whole tour of the Holy City of Tzfat, and later on for the not so holy but important city of Tel Aviv on the shores of the Mediterranean. And then later that month, in the end of June, we'll be once again visiting the Golan Heights. And we have a very, very special major. He just got promoted, Yaakov Sullivan, who's going to meet us over there to talk about all of the humanitarian missions that Israel's been going on and conducting and fulfilling in Syria during their almost 10-year civil war right now. And of course, the geopolitics in the area and all the good things that are coming out of the Golan Heights. So we hope you can visit all those, but I'm looking forward to doing it live with you. So contact the Atlanta Israel Coalition and talk to them about this tour that they're putting together. We want to seek out some interest and, find out what you're interested in seeing and what you're interested in doing so that we can bring all of you here to Israel and in person. I look forward to that very much.
Me too. Thank you so much, David. And thank you everybody for joining us. We hope to see you on our next tours. Definitely want to thank our sponsors again, the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta and Innovation Initiative, the Consulate General of Israel to the Southeast, Herut, North America, and the Evans Family Foundation. We couldn't do this without all of you also. So again, from my heart, thank you so much for being here. Our promotional partners, our media partners, and reach out if you have any more questions, if you have any ideas for programming, anything you want to see. We're definitely here for you, and we are excited to be here with you. David, are you still here? Okay.
Yes,
well,
I
guess,
am. Yes, I am.
Okay, great. We have one more question actually that is a really
Sure.
good one. So I hope you don't mind me jumping back in.
Not at all.
During the 10 days, which the doors are open in the building, are Arabs and Jews allowed in each other's spaces?
So there are 10 days that the Arabs get full control of the building. And so all the Sefer Torahs are brought out and all the Jewish artifacts are brought out of the Jewish side. And there's 10 days that the Arabs, that the Jews have full control and the Arabs don't come in. On very rare occasions is there the security apparatus is available to enable those that want to worship peacefully side by side, Jews, Christians, and Arabs. That has to be done very specially because unfortunately there's a lot of people who want to destroy those efforts. And so you need extra security for it. So right now it's divided, Arabs on one side, Jews on the other. And then 10 days, all Arabs, all Jews. And then every now and then, a few times a year, you do have it, a special program where Jews and Arabs and Christians come here in peace and coexistence, praying to our shared forefather, not two, but praying to God by the graves of our shared ancestor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. Please follow us on Facebook, follow our YouTube page. We have all of our past program, including the Jerusalem tour there and other tours and programs. And we will see you next month. Thanks.